For generations, the story of human civilization followed a very strict script. It starts with small bands of hunter-gatherers, constantly on the move, chasing herds and foraging to survive in unforgiving environments. According to this timeline, agriculture was the critical turning point. The assumption held that once humans figured out how to plant and harvest crops, the need to stay and guard those fields forced them to stop migrating and build villages. This diagram shows the linear sequence historians relied on for decades. First came farming, which provided a surplus of calories. That surplus provided the free time and labor required to develop complex religious systems, establish hierarchies, and ultimately erect monumental stone architecture. The academic consensus on this sequence was absolute. Without the calorie surplus provided by agriculture, the labor force required to build massive stone monuments could not exist. Then, in 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt re-examined a dusty, overlooked hill in southeastern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. What he found beneath the soil dismantled the textbook timeline. Schmidt's team uncovered a sprawling complex of massive limestone pillars, some standing 15 feet tall and weighing several tons. Many were intricately carved with detailed reliefs of wild animals, and radiocarbon dating proved they were erected around 9500 BCE. That date presents a massive problem. 9.5 millennia BCE places the construction of this site thousands of years before the widespread adoption of agriculture in this region. Consider Stonehenge for context. Göbekli Tepe predates the famous British stone circle by a staggering 6,000 years. This creates a glaring historical paradox. How did nomadic hunter-gatherers, operating without the benefit of farming or cities, coordinate the immense labor required to quarry, carve, and erect these megaliths? And why exactly did they do it? The architectural footprint of Göbekli Tepe is immense. Ground-penetrating radar indicates there are nearly 20 circular enclosures buried here, featuring floors made of burnt lime and almost 200 monolithic T-shaped pillars. The artwork carved into these stones is striking. Instead of the game animals they hunted for food, the pillars are covered with aggressive predators: vultures, snarling lions, wild boars, and scorpions. Looking at the scale and the intense iconography, Klaus Schmidt concluded that Göbekli Tepe was a pure sanctuary, a sanctuary on a hill. He argued the site had no permanent inhabitants, only visitors. Based on early estimates, researchers believed it would take hundreds of people to move just one of these pillars. The working theory suggested that scattered bands of nomads were either lured in by feasts or coerced by a small religious elite to gather periodically for these massive building projects. This initial interpretation inverted the accepted timeline. It argued that a shared urge to worship and build sacred monuments is what initially motivated humans to settle down in one place, driving them to invent farming later to feed the builders. Archaeology is a science of constant revision. Following Schmidt's death in 2014, a new generation of researchers utilized advanced geophysical surveys to look deeper into the ground, and they started to see a fairly different picture. Right alongside the monumental pillars, excavations revealed evidence of everyday domestic life, including rectangular rooms with support beam placements. Archaeologists identified rainwater harvesting systems and cataloged over 7,000 grinding stones used to process wild cereals. People lived directly inside the complex. This schematic illustrates a drastically revised labor estimate. Modern experiments demonstrated that by using ropes and simple lubricants, moving a multi-ton limestone pillar didn't require hundreds. A single extended family of 12 to 24 people could quarry and transport the stones themselves. Furthermore, the stratigraphy showed that the site suffered from severe landslides. These events repeatedly buried the lower enclosures in mud and rubble, forcing the inhabitants to dig out, repair, and often completely rebuild their structures over centuries. The picture that emerges from this new data is grounded and practical. Göbekli Tepe was a bustling, permanent village where a community was locked in a constant, generations-long struggle with the natural elements. Today, we understand that at Göbekli Tepe, the sacred and the secular coexisted side by side. People built their homes, ground their wild wheat, and raised their monumental predator-carved pillars in the same space. This site forces us to rethink the Neolithic Revolution. The transition from foraging to farming lasted thousands of years, characterized by a slow, localized blend of wild resource management and emerging settlement patterns. The builders of Göbekli Tepe lived a nuanced lifestyle. While they still tracked large herds of gazelle in massive seasonal hunts, they were already settling down, managing water, and processing huge quantities of wild grains to support a permanent population. Historians once argued that civilization began when a seed was planted in the dirt, forcing nomads to stay put to guard their crops. Göbekli Tepe suggests otherwise. The architecture of society came first. Long before domesticated agriculture, the human desire to gather together, to share a rich cultural life, and to cooperate in building something permanent provided the foundational bedrock of the modern world.